I enjoy all jests immensely. I have enjoyed the joke of your tottering feeble adventure in my land, but the comfort of laughter fades as my impatience grows, and I shall crush you now. Simply crush you.
Strahd von Zarovich stands nearly alone as one of a handful of truly iconic Dungeons & Dragons characters. Strahd is inseparable from the gothic horror setting of Ravenloft, and I mean that quite literally. Ravenloft is the name of a small number of domains, ripped from their natural planes by the mists that surround them. And yet each of these domains hosts a single lord, who is in truth a mere prisoner. Strahd von Zarovich is the Dark Lord, the prisoner, and king of the lands of Barovia. Welcome everyone to part 1 of my Spooktober special. I'll be covering both of the SSI Ravenloft games, so please subscribe and turn on notifications if you're interested in delving into the murky depths of 1990s Ravenloft adaptations. And if this video can get 500 likes, I'm gonna squeeze in a review of the god-awful Ravenloft fighting game that came out after SSI lost the license. And by the way, that's actually not the only thing we've got lined up this month. I've gathered a guild together in the 2006 Dungeons & Dragons Online MMO, and I'd like you to play with us. We're going to be playing for the entire month of October while I get set up to review it, and if you'd like to join us, you'll find a link to our guild Discord in the description below.
Modern players will be familiar with the Curse of Strahd campaign that was released in 2016 for D&D 5th edition, which was a heavily renovated remake of the original 1983 module written by Laura and Tracy Hickman. Curse of Strahd is a campaign that I am currently a player in right now. So, I actually apologize if the scope of this video is a touch tighter in focus than normal. I am seriously trying my hardest to play Strahd's Possession and spoil as little of Curse of Strahd for myself as possible, futile though that may be. And by the way, I'm going to try to ensure that the details about Strahd himself and his motivations aren't in this video, because I don't really want to spoil Curse of Strahd for you guys either. Regardless, I can tell you that the Barovia we see in the modern campaign setting is much broader and larger than the one we see in the classic Ravenloft module or in the video game. And yet even so, it's the same old Strahd with the same motivations as ever before. I'm not going to go confirm that because I do not want my dungeon master to murder me dead if I stumble across things I am not supposed to know. But while I'm terrified to dig too deep into the Ravenloft setting for this video, I can tell you that Strahd's Possession came out during a very short sort of D&D video game dark age. The license for these games was held by SSI in a 7-year contract that started in 1988. And while the SSI games were considered excellent off the hop, sometime around 92 or 93, the public started to perceive a decline in quality. Gone were the glory days of the gold and silver box titles, which had started growing stale. The SSI logo, once a mark of quality, had started to lose its luster. And unfortunately, that's sort of how our memory of this gap of time has stayed. D&D video games kind of fall off of the collective memory until Baldur's Gate comes out in 1998, and most of the ones that we do remember, like Descent to Undermountain, are most typically not remembered for good reasons. But the problem is that there were a few games, like Strahd's Possession, and a few others that were really good actually, and somehow they still managed to fade away into obscurity. Strahd's Possession deserved better, even if it took a few hours for me to love it. Let's start at the beginning.
In a rush of explosive magic, the door to Del's home toward the sun. It is too late. With each stride toward the door comes the icy realization of failure. Amid the debris lie Delt and the mage Baranta Chanson, still alive, yet both mauled by the ferocity of the attack.
Thank the gods you're here with us. By Helm, if only a moment sooner. The assassin who sought our lives has failed, but in his hand lies the holy symbol of Helm, the amulet torn from me as we fought. The cutthroat moves quickly toward the forest beyond the castle. Stop him and retrieve the amulet. Go now!
Okay, we are Lord Delt's finest. Let's track down this bastard assassin. Combat! Okay, well, alright, that was a bit of a bloodbath, but we got him dead. Let's grab his stuff and bring him back to Lord Delt. Is what I would say if Ravenloft was not an isekai setting. We wake up in the mist-wrapped lands of Ravenloft, where we are immediately eaten by wargs. Game over. So I stepped back from Ravenloft for the day after getting messily devoured, and I thought hard about this. If I died this hard the moment I stepped into Ravenloft, was I even going to be able to play this game? In the morning, I decided that the answer was yes, because I was gonna get good. I resolved myself to play the Ravenloft games the same way I played Dark Souls. I was gonna be patient with myself, and I was never going to play when frustrated. Beyond that, I knew that the key to success was going to have to be knowledge. There's a lot of complexity going on here, and I don't even have a surface level read on what's going on. I plunged into the Good Old Games forums and the web at large to find what scraps of info I could, and I learned a lot. Strahd's Possession is a member of a somewhat small subgenre of FPS RPG games which are party-based. If you aren't familiar with such games, you might wonder how the hell that works. But in practice, it's actually very simple. When you attack an enemy, your party just takes turns attacking with their weapons, going from left to right. And when you use the spells or abilities of your party members, it comes out of your screen just as if it was a single character RPG. It's a bit of an abstraction for party mechanics, but it honestly functions a lot better than you might think, and you won't worry about it for too long. The combat is, it's hard when you start. The controls are very dated, though, not uniquely so. It is a product of its time. You can't turn around any way other than clicking the directional pad on the screen, but you also need to click on your enemies in order to attack them. It's not that hard, but it is something that takes a lot of getting used to. It felt to me like I was a 5-year-old who didn't know how the controller worked again. I rebuilt my character with the new information I had. The strategy, you see, is to have a single-classed melee character in your front rank, who will get very strong by virtue of being single-classed, and then have some form of multi-classed caster in your back rank for utility. The forums also told me that it's apparently not worth taking followers with you outside of your 2 initial characters, because they kinda just soak up all of your experience points without actually adding too much to your party. I took these lessons to heart, and went back into character creation, making Relica the Paladin and Eldane the Cleric Mage. Now, all the advice on the forum said that this is an extremely hard game, so I should just cheese the stats in the character creation section. You either get to roll for your stats, or choose them. And when I say choose them, I mean choose, not like use a point by, you can max out everything if you want. It felt like this would be compromising my standards. I'm an optimizer, not a tryhard. So I compromised and gave myself obscenely good stats instead of maxed out stats. I returned to Ravenloft with my 2 heroes, ready to get good. Good strategy aside, I still had to get a grip on these controls. I had to be careful to not backpedal too far for fear of pulling more wargs. It was slow, grinding and dirty work, where I fought to clear every inch of the ground around me. But at last, I managed to stabilize my run and get my bearings. And it was here, as I was carving a hard-fought zone of safety around the spawn point, that I discovered the first thing I really liked about this game. The music totally bangs. My god, incredible. It's very Stranger Things-esque in a very good way. However, great as this music is, there's this one track that's just comically bad, and we run into it a little bit in this forest where I spawned in. It plays when you go into the basement of the ruined house right in front of you, and it's just, I'll just play it. Pretty much every track in this game is certifiably incredible D&D music, except for this one. Anyway, once I got my bearings in Barovia, I was able to assess the situation. After killing the man who attacked Lord Delt and retaking the amulet, we were isekai'd into Ravenloft, with the amulet having gone missing. We were, however, left with the assassin's note. Apparently, he had just escaped Barovia and needed Delt's necklace in order to return and defeat Dark Lord Strahd to free the land. If he hadn't tried to kill Delt to get the amulet, he might have been the protagonist of this story. But instead, it's me. All two of me. Both of me. I clear the area some more, defeating a small goblin encampment, and we find a captured fighter named Falcon. I figured that, despite the advice on the forums that I shouldn't bother with companions, I could probably afford a second fighter for now to help me through the early game, and, I'll just ditch him later once I get into town. I couldn't figure out how to ditch him, though, so I ended up being forced to keep him with me for much longer than I meant to. I hate this guy. Well, regardless, he was at least a little bit helpful to have in the party. We then limped our way through an entire hurricane of wargs, until, battered and bloodied, we emerged on the Svalich Road. And from here, I realized that the worst was behind me. I was now capable of playing this game. I was getting better at the controls, and my party was functioning. So naturally, I advanced down the road, and Falcon got murdered by bandits. Freeloader. I try again, and this time I learned that the hold person spell is very useful. See, when I mentioned I was going to treat this game like Dark Souls, I meant it. And that meant I was going to have to pay attention to the lessons that this game was trying to teach me. Because exactly like Dark Souls, whenever you come across something that seems excessively hard, it kind of just means you're missing something, and the game wants you to learn it. See, we got ambushed by all those wargs right off the spawn, but they're all spread out, and they're not so bad if you can fight them one-on-one. This is a lesson on positioning. You'll learn how to keep the enemy in front of you without aggroing more wargs. Then, here on the path, we learn a second lesson. You're going to need your spells, and you're going to need to get good at flipping through the spellbook during mid-combat. This time, we kill the bandits much more easily, and the quest continues on our hunt for civilization. The first sign of it comes from a Vistani we meet on the road. Now, the Vistani are a source of some controversy, and I just don't know enough on the subject to speak out about whether or not the Vistani are a harmful stereotype, so I just do what you will with that information. Let's move on. In any case, our Vistani friend lets us know that only a Vistani potion can get us through the mists that surround Barovia. He wants 15 gold for it, which should be easy enough. We just gotta do some quests or something and get paid. Last person we meet on the road is a possible companion, and I was cursing the fact that I couldn't figure out how to dismiss Falcon because I really wanted to get this obvious bard instead. But no, I was stuck with a man who managed to get captured by goblins, and I had to leave the cool companion behind or else my main characters would miss out on XP. After deciding I care more about XP than I do about traveling companions, I stumble into the village of Barovia. And it's both very large and very desolate. We're told pretty early on that we need to seek out the burgomaster, but there's a lot of houses, so we've got some exploring to do. It was in this environment that the game taught me another lesson. Strahd's possession lets you write notes on the map, and you're going to need to do it in Barovia. Good luck figuring out whether or not you've explored certain buildings without it. Your memory might be that good, mine is not. Also, apparently you could print out your maps from this game, and I wanted to try it, but the button did absolutely nothing. I'm sure it worked in 1994 on old computers, but it does not do it today. Anyway, we find a lot in these buildings in Barovia. Side quests, companions, loot, abandoned houses with monsters, and more. I even triggered one quest in which a ghost possessed me way too early into the game. See, he said he'd let me go if I killed a ghoul in the graveyard, but I didn't know where that was, and when I looked it up, it said I can't access the graveyard until I'm way farther into the game. So I had to reload, or else he'd do a bunch of negative stuff to my character for the entire first half of the game. Eventually, I find the burgomaster, and he tells me that a certain Count Strahd von Zarovich has invited me to Castle Ravenloft. We have already been warned that Strahd's invitations often lead to the guests meeting an awful fate. But it's not like we've got a lot of options, so it's time to go eat fancy food in an evil castle, because I mean, that's just self-care.
It can be none other than Strahd von Zorovich.
Welcome to Castle Ravenloft. I trust I have not inconvenienced you. The land entraps many. Its ruler is no exception. And so I have devoted my life to this problem. It is the least a lord can do for his people, is it not? My most recent study concerns certain portals, those dimensional gateways of which mages and philosophers speak. One such portal may lie in the caverns west of Barovia, near the river. Aside from myself, I believe you are the first to hear of it. But please, before you rush to the shores of the Ivlis, allow me to present you with a key. If you are to gain entrance to these caverns, you will find it necessary.
Now, since we've just heard from Big Vamp on campus, I figure it's a pretty good time to talk about the voice acting.
Ravenloft!
It's mostly kind of amateurish, albeit on the more competent end of amateurish. This leaves the voice acting in a state where you can't really complain, but you also definitely cannot give it a compliment. It's a solid 5 out of 10, you know what I mean? And the voice of Strahd, in my opinion, needed to be a step above everyone else. And I mean, he was, but not by much. I can't help but feel like this was a wasted opportunity. And I lament that they didn't shell out for a larger named voice actor for the role of Strahd. And I do kinda gotta put them on the smallest bit of a blast here, because the audio leveling is really bad. You can barely hear the voice actors over the music.
Or if necessary, if truly desperately necessary, honest work. Of course, even an adventure would be preferable to that. Are you online?
But this, I discovered, was for a reason.
Once again, allow me to welcome you to Ravenloft.
The background static in their recordings are, well, they're a lot. And I'm damn near certain they tried to cover up the static by blaring their music over top. It was a poor choice. We now return to Barovia, and I take some time to throw all my crap down on the floor of a room in the tavern like the slob I am. Though I did make a mistake when I did so. The inventory management is a 1 item per 1 slot sort of affair, but you can take the chests and bags you find your treasures in with you for more inventory slots. Early on, when you don't have enough containers, you're kind of like that kid on Christmas who likes the box more than the gift that was inside of it. My mistake was that I stored all of my junk in what few bags and chests I had, and then I left those containers in the tavern. I was doing this like a Minecraft thing, when I should have just been throwing all of my junk directly on the floor. I would be regretting my lack of containers over the entire dungeon I was about to enter. On the way out of the cavern, I meet an obvious ninja named Irmgard, who says that I'm both dumb and stinky for being in Ravenloft, but she was wrong. I'm dumb and stinky for other reasons.
Malodorous and filthy.
My preparations complete, I make my way to the cave that Strahd told me about, where I find that Irmgard has apparently teleported herself there ahead of me. She says that I'm gonna need her help to get through the portal, and that she still thinks I'm dumb and stinky for being in Ravenloft. But this time, she admits that she is also dumb and stinky for being in Ravenloft, and would like to come with me, so that the group of us can improve our collective IQ and BO by leaving Ravenloft. Smart. Inside the cave, I find another clown named Vladislav who says that I have to take him with me too, and he also won't let me into the cave until I accept. I agree by virtue of the fact that I have no choice. And finally, this allows me to get rid of Falcon. This cave is where the game starts to really come together. It's the final filter forcing the uncommitted to leave. Only pain lies ahead, and you will not be leaving until the game has taught you all the dungeon delving lessons that you need to know. I'm gonna be honest, this cave does not feel good. It's a gigantic labyrinth of slimy green walls filled with teleporters, mysterious keyholes, and skeletons. And yet, all of this was necessary. The difficulty navigating and keeping track of the sites of interest, it's incredibly hard to manage, and so you must make sure you've internalized the game's final major lesson. This is not merely a game about dungeon crawling. This is a game about dungeon cartography. Much like with Barovia, you're gonna have to mark everything on your map. Every keyhole, staircase, teleporter, and trap must be cataloged. Once I started doing my due diligence, only then did this cave begin revealing its secrets to me. But once this started, once I had seized the initiative and understood what was asked of me, the most peculiar things started happening. Deep underground, in this miserable slime cave that has punished and confused me over and over, I started to have fun. I could move well, I knew my abilities now, and how to access them quickly, and I was finally properly equipped to navigate a labyrinth like this. All the pieces had come together, and from that moment on, I was hooked on Strahd's possession. And on this high note, leaving the cavern a better person than I entered, I find the portal that Strahd asked me to. And it doesn't work. I wake up hours later, passed out in a field. Irmgard and Vladislav have both abandoned me, never to be seen again, having dumped their crap on the grass. I go back to the Burgomaster, but he will neither pay me for doing Strahd's task, nor take me to Strahd so that he will pay me. Hey, guys, come on, I've got a Vistani potion to buy, and no money to speak of. I'd have settled for a vendor where I could sell my crap, but Barovia has no such thing. If I want money, one of these motherfuckers is gonna have to pay me. I post about my misfortune on r/antiwork, and then I try to assess where to go from here. I had a few things going for me. Number 1, I had found a key to a church in that cave. Number 2, I was now free of leeches in my party who were sucking up my XP. I explore a little to see if I can find the church. This game is clearly a dungeon crawler first and foremost, but it does have plenty of open world areas ready to be explored. Now that Strahd's task is done, we enter that video game mode where we don't have a lot of guidance, we simply go wherever we can. I eventually find that this church is to the north of town, and I head in. I get my ass handed to me by hellhounds, and even though I just barely scrape by, I learn another lesson. I learn that I might actually disagree with the tips I got about keeping your party at 2 members. While it's true that having a second frontliner is a bit of a waste, I really liked having a second caster around. Therefore, shortly after entering the dungeon, I leave again to go seek out a mage to recruit. I know of 3 options. As cool as the bard is, I find out that she's a fighter mage thief, and that's just too much multi-classing. This drops my options to a pair of pure mages. The first is a strange guy with a bear hood who lives in a shack. The second is a fellow victim of isekai who has managed to freeload off that damned Burgomaster and drink all his booze while deriding him the whole time. So I mean, obviously I'm taking her.
We may leave by your leave.
Please, there are other books, magical volumes I haven't yet displayed before you. You must stay.
Back to the church. The priest is paralyzed in a stupefied prayer, and it's one of the more haunting images in the game, as his frozen body cries in anguish. We find a mirror nearby that appears to have the priest's soul trapped within, so we head into the basement area to find the secret passphrase that will break the spell. Seeing the second dungeon in all its glory was really when my opinions on the graphics fully solidified. The art team was extremely competent, and they did an excellent job with their work. Not everything in this game is beautiful. Some things are downright ugly, but they weren't ugly because of incompetence. Areas like that slimy cave were ugly because slimy caves are ugly. The art direction was such that it made you appreciate beautiful areas like the old church or Castle Ravenloft. The sheer visual variety on display is one of my favorite parts of this game. Near as I can tell, none of the dungeons repeat tile sets from one another, so everything feels distinct and it doesn't blend together. This isn't just a graphical thing either. Each dungeon has its own distinct music track, unique enemies, and even some unique color swaps for your UI. The game really goes that extra mile to make all of the dungeons feel separate from one another, and this goes a long way to ensuring that the game stays fresh during the entire playthrough. Even if a dungeon is ugly and miserable, you'll be glad it it was there to punctuate the more scenic zones. All this to say, the old church was very nice to look at, and it was nowhere near the last zone that looked this good. Even though I had figured out almost everything about the gameplay, the old church did have one final lesson to impart. The lesson that this is still a 90s game, and sometimes it's just not fair. You do have to find a lot of hidden switches, secret walls, and triggers and stuff, and I mean, these are actually usually pretty fair, but more importantly, they're varied. The game didn't feel too frustrating, and I never felt resentful that it was forcing me to find hidden things to progress the dungeon. This is largely because the variety made sure it didn't get too frustrating, and the fact that all of the dungeons were so distinct from one another meant that I was never upset to spend more time in one of them. But there is the rare time when you've missed a secret door that has no hints anywhere and you're left completely dead-ended. This is what happened to me at the end of the church mission, and I had to learn the final lesson. The game comes with an official clue book, and you should probably use it instead of letting the game ruin your fun if you're stuck. At the end of this dungeon, we find two things. The first is a catalog that outlines the 5 artifacts needed to escape from Ravenloft. The second is the magic passphrase to get the priest unstuck from the mirror. I save him, and I get out my wallet so that I can deposit the money he gives me, except that he doesn't pay me, he just gives me a key to the graveyard and laments that his apprentice is dead. But, I mean, the apprentice, he's not regular dead. He's extra dead. Like, bro, I had like 5 scrolls of Ray's dead in my inventory, but that won't work. He's too dead for that. He's like VIP dead. Well, now I am left with but one singular lead. I can enter the graveyard. But I'm enjoying the game so much that I decide it's time to try out one of the game's few side quests. In the Barovian village, there was an old disgraced paladin who wanted his amulet back from the catacombs in which he had abandoned it years ago. So we go dungeon diving, and it's... oh god, the walls, they look like they're made of rotting meat, and the doors are made of... God, I fucking love this dungeon. I emerge hours later, caked in entrails and viscera, with an amulet in my hand and a big dumb grin on my face. The paladin rewards me with a sword that the internet says is a +3 paladin sword, but mine didn't appear to have any indication of that +3. So I don't know, I assume it was bugged. Either way, it looked nice, so I had Relica dual wield the paladin sword and dagger anytime I didn't need her to use a shield. You will note, this man did not pay me my 15 gold. Side quest over, I have to go save the world. Now that I have access to the graveyard, I go back into that ghost's house and I get possessed again. Then I head into the cemetery to kick some necrotic ass. This being an older D&D game, permanent level drain starts being a thing from this moment onward. So you really need to keep the game manual open at all times to check which creatures will permanently de-level you when you get hit by them. This can be countered in 2 ways. The first is that they can't take your levels if they can't hit you. It's important to stack spells like Blur and Prayer on your heavily armored frontliner from now on. There's also a spell called Negative Plane Protection that clerics can cast, which will counter 1 level draining attack that gets through your AC. So your frontliner needs to have it on them at all times. This buff routine, working together with a policy of ranged nuke spells, meant that I was able to get through the graveyard pretty well and slay the ghoul. The ghost then lets me go and tells me that there's a reward waiting in his house. But I'll go back for that later to check. For now, I see a colossal elven tomb in front of me, so it's time to dungeon dive. I seem to be missing something. The statues out front inform me that the Banshee is their murdered sister, who is slain along with her beloved. I offer them a tribute of dust for some reason.
I bring you air from my lungs.
And with this tribute, they agree to put their sister to sleep so that I can enter. Inside, we find the considerably calmer ghost of the husband. My script just says women, am I right? The ghost sends us into the tomb for a locket that will free the pair of them from undeath. This dungeon is a long one, with 2 completely filled out floors. The top floor is fine enough, but the bottom is probably my least favorite part of the game. You're alternating between gigantic fire elementals that you cannot safely fight in melee, and hordes of ghosts that will level drain you, so you also can't safely fight them in melee. It's this extremely long period where you have to play things excessively cautiously, and it's a far cry from the mood in the rest of the game. Strahd's possession rewards patience and knowledge about both your enemies and your toolset, but it doesn't necessarily require caution outside of this particular dungeon. You can rush in sword first and be certain of victory if you came prepared, but that's not really a thing in this dungeon. It's slow, grindy work to clear this place out, and you're gonna have to sleep every 2 combats so that you have enough spells to spam at the enemy. Eventually, the amulet is obtained, and we are rewarded with some fancy gear. Oh, and an elven crown, which is the first of the 5 objects needed to escape Ravenloft. However, none of these things open up new zones or doors for us. We are, for the first time, directionless. I took a little inventory and realized that I actually had 2 paths open to me. The first was that I needed to pick up the treasure from the ghost's house, and while it was not money, it turned out to be a gemstone, and the second item required to leave Ravenloft. Good enough, I guess. Okay, but still dead-ended though. Dead-ended. Dead. Wait, don't I know a guy who's dead? Like, extra dead? Like a paid subscriber to Quadruple Mega Death? And I appear to have picked up something called a Rod of Rebirth inside of the Elven tomb. Boop. And then he gave me the key to Ravenloft. Knowing that he had this, I now understand why Strahd f***ing Dectuple murdered this guy. The North Svalich Road, overrun by zombies, was nevertheless the ideal moment to think about how far I'd come. Gone were the days when I was in Castle Ravenloft last, when I could barely turn the camera. My party is tougher, more capable, more skilled and canny. We were, I was certain, ready for whatever Strahd von Zarovich could throw at us. I was wrong. Because, after conquering the entirety of the castle and tearing out the dark secrets one by one from its shrouded, pulsating heart, my save file got corrupted and I had to reload from the beginning. Fortunately, I had a backup save at the beginning of the dungeon, so I had to start over. And for sanity's sake, this time I tore the bare minimum number of dark secrets from the castle's shrouded, pulsating heart. Castle Ravenloft has a different design philosophy from a lot of the other dungeons. The others are big, labyrinthine rectangles, whereas the castle is a lot more vertical. The maps are smaller, but there's a bunch more of them, and you'll be traveling between them a lot. We also come across the first enemy in a long time where I couldn't figure out how to beat it. These flesh golems are a nightmare. I killed 1 or 2 the hard way, and it was a bloodbath. They can tank so much damage and dish it back out 5-fold. I had to take a deep breath, and I had to do my research. The forums told me that I could use the Rod of Smiting against them, and that worked okay. It hit them really hard, but it still just came down to a slugfest that I was unlikely to win. But then I realized that there was only one good way to defeat them. The power of Beyblade. Yeah, I mean, you just use Turn Undead on them and they break. At the top of the tower in Strahd's castle, we free a prisoner who turns out to be none other than a were-raven. The prisoner tells us to go find his friends, the holders of the feather. Then he turns into his were-raven form and leaves. He at least gives us one of his feathers before he goes, however, which is apparently the third object we need in order to flee Ravenloft. We're done in the castle for now, but we'll be back later. The Raven's friends stuff us in a black van and take us to a meeting location. A second were-raven is waiting there to talk to me. I make my terms very clear. I say to him, "Hey bruv, we saved your friend. I want money." He says, "Oh yeah, money. I'm picking up what you're laying down, son." And he hands me a key. And I say, "Bro, no, come on, not a key. I want money for the potion so that I can leave." And he says, "Say no more, say no more. I can't pay you, but you actually can use that key to get beneath the church and find the whereabouts of the amulet of Ravenkind that can be used to kill Strahd." And I say, listen, this does not work for me. I need money. the innkeeper keeps laughing at me for trying to buy drinks when I'm this broke, and the were-raven says, "Oh, no, I can't hear you because Strahd's undead are here now, and oh no, we need to leave, but I mean, just think of the exposure you'll get if you kill Strahd." They all escape, leaving me to need to find my way out of this catacomb that they black vanned me into, which is now flooded with Strahd's minions. And after getting my teeth kicked in a few times, I find something incredible on the floor. I find a coin. There are exactly 15 Barovian coins in this dungeon, and I scoured every inch of the map like it was the goddamned couch cushions. At long last, grifted by every person who hired us, we have pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I stand before the Vistani, and I know that I can finally leave Barovia. And then I think to myself, you know what? If I killed Strahd, I actually would get a lot of exposure. The Were-Raven's Key opens up a secret mini-dungeon below the old church. It's not important, but what we do find in there is a note saying that the amulet of the Were-Raven is in an undead forest that can only be accessed by drinking a Vistani potion and wandering off into the mist. Goddamn hero's journey. I would have saved myself an hour of dungeon crawling if I just took the potion and ran. Okay, we drop off our life savings in exchange for this potion, and we delve into the veiled mists at the far edge of Barovia. I am immediately surrounded with more unsolicited wood than a more competent telling of this joke. One of the trees was nice, however, so I destroyed it, and I took the Amulet of Ravenkind from its guts. Amulet obtained. Oh yeah, it's vampire hunting time. We go back to Castle Ravenloft, and I retrace my steps to all the areas I didn't replay after my save file broke. Within these areas, we find a tarot card, the fourth of the 5 items needed to escape Ravenloft. And then we descend into the dark heart of Strahd von Tsarovich's dungeons.
Once again, allow me to welcome you to Ravenloft. The time has come. Oh, but please, don't be afraid to smile. Stand not so grimly before me. I shall not trouble you with explanations. Long speeches tire me. Still, a gentleman has certain obligations, does he not? Simply put, you have caused me trouble. More trouble than you are worth. And I shall crush you now. Simply crush you.
The battle with Strahd, it's a little bit anticlimactic. Largely because I think the devs needed to give it a few more rounds of tweaking. The Count hurls fireballs at you while teleporting around the room. Unfortunately, Strahd has a hard time figuring out where to teleport, and he spends most of the fight slamming his bolts of Inferno into the walls over and over. The player, however, needs to do nothing more than hit him a few times with an energy bolt from the Amulet of Ravenkind. And then you get to see the proud Strahd, the eternal titan of undeath and villainy, gripped in his death through— oh, he just disappears. Okay. He does drop Lord Delt's amulet, however, and it's the final item we needed in order to go home. We are intercepted by the god Helm, who gives his personal thanks to us, and then we arrive at the castle of our liege lord.
Just as Helm promised. But the thanks for retrieving my symbol go to you alone. Welcome back to Elturel. Baranta Shansil will be no less pleased than I, for she is well. The assassin failed in all his work, and we alone shall laugh and savor our victory for years to come. I shall make certain you are well rewarded, cared for, and blessed with wealth for as long as life remains to us.
He's gonna pay us. He's gonna pay us! Closing thoughts. I really like this game. Way more than I thought I would. The game had to win me over, and it absolutely did. A lot of the stuff I look for in modern games is in this game that came out all the way back in '94. And if you're into first-person RPGs like Bethesda games, I actually think you'll probably like Strahd's Possession. I'd recommend getting the GOG version rather than the Steam version because it comes with the manual and the clue book. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, stick around for later this month when I'll be reviewing the sequel to this game, Stone Prophet. And consider donating on Patreon if you want to support the channel, get listed in the credits, and prove yourself to be a better boss than Strahd.